I subscribe to a newsletter from a poet I respect and have had the pleasure to interview right here on this channel, Elisabeth Blair. The newsletter is Lullabies and Alarms, and you should go check it out. Just Google for it. It's packed with prompts and new ways to approach your next poem. In her latest, she sent out a piece called No Experience Required and laid out the case that too many poets have become discouraged because they feel their poetry isn't good enough. She writes, quote, "It wastes precious time in these very short lives of ours to judge art and poetry at all." And then she says, creativity has been siloed, and there's so much pressure to do it right that many of us give up before we've begun. Now, why is that? According to Blair, it's because of white supremacy, of capitalism, various forms of privilege, and the institutions that support those things. Now, sure, if you want to become a classical violinist or a ballet dancer, sure, yeah, you're going to face up against certain societal structures that can place most people at a pretty significant disadvantage. I mean, if your parents don't have the resources, don't have access, and don't get you started pretty young, it's going to be an uphill battle. Some of that is on society, for sure. And some of it is just because it's really, really fucking hard to learn ballet. And you have to commit when you're pretty young. Now, I don't want to get derailed, and sure, we could say classical music or ballet or whatever is inherently racist or even white supremacist. And that would be another argument for another video, probably on another channel, that I don't want to get into right now. Suffice it to say, for me personally, I would have a hard time with the inherent idea there. But even outside of these very strict, incredibly technical performance disciplines, quality still creates distinctions between people. And those distinctions aren't always about race or privilege. Quality matters no matter what form of leisure you're pursuing, and whether it's a night on the town or just kicking it by yourself. There's better and worse ways to kill time at every level, and I believe everybody is intensely aware of it, even at a very informal level. Let's take the community gathering. A good DJ makes for a kickin' good time, and a bad DJ makes for people flooding the exits. Let's say there's a potluck involved here, guys. There's that gal with the killer mac and cheese. There's a line to her crock pot, right? And the ones right next to hers are basically untouched. That's gotta mean something. We can't just ignore that testimony of our senses, right? She put her heart and soul into that food. She appreciates people who recognize what she's done and who take the time to go out of their way and offer her a kind word after. Now, those other chefs can also learn from her. And when she talks about cheese selection or what have you, those other lesser chefs need to shut the fuck up, right? That isn't being judgmental or snobby. That's just helping everybody get better, right? And be better collectively. Nothing about capitalism here, right? We're all trying to get better and help each other live better lives. Now, obviously, I don't think Blair is talking about the potluck here. I think she's talking about this highbrow world of art, where you walk into a gallery and you wonder if the show is open yet, or whether it's actually supposed to look like a drunk college kid gave up on it halfway through. Or you go to a fancy restaurant, right? And their idea of mac and cheese is like this deconstructed Alfredo concept with some minute speck of cheese and 2 measly strands of pasta and a sprinkle of balsamic. And yeah, poetry has a lot of stuff like that, stuff that really doesn't satisfy, right? And Blair writes about this divisive world of grants and how bad it makes people feel when you're being judged on if you're good enough and whether you deserve money for your writing. I don't really know there's that much money available, from governments handing out cash to people writing. And we're talking about pretty small sums, but sure, I mean, the professorships and, the fellowships and all these other things, government and non-governmental, these foundations, that adds up to, people can make a living doing this. And that does feel harsh, right? And it's my opinion, not hers, that a lot of those people who receive big bucks and have big fancy fellowships and professorships are writing absolute fucking garbage, total drivel, right? Now, that doesn't mean just because everything's crazy out there and there's people getting paid to crank out garbage poetry, it doesn't disqualify the notion of quality, right? Because on this channel, the whole goal has never been to accept someone else's standard as your own. It's always been to develop your own compass, your own taste, your own judgment, so you never, ever get caught up in that 3-ring shit show of the highbrow world out there. If skill, technique, and yes, judgment didn't exist, whether I put any effort into cooking dinner would make zero difference. Food would be nothing more than a way to seek nutrients and would say nothing at all about whether I gave a crap about how it tastes. And dancing wouldn't be expressive. It would just be rhythmic aerobics, going through the motions. And music would be mere vibrations, a cold science of manipulating intervals. Poetry would be prose with line breaks, not about surprise and delight, not about lullabies and alarms. Blair writes that life is too short to be judgmental. Quite the contrary, it's too short not to be. So go ahead, state your opinion. Chances are someone else was thinking it anyway.